Okay, we are live right now, folks. We are a very special guest today. I get my second chance.
Oh, yes,
I'm going to behave
do.
this time, Deborah.
You will.
But before I start behaving properly, you got to remember one call does it all. Bill Brown Sales. Go to billbrownsales.com. We're very gracious that Bill Brown has sponsored all of the live streams.
Hey, hi, Bill.
Yeah, come on,
He's
Bill
a
Brown.
sweetie.
He sure is, and he
I
came
know.
on the show. So
Oh, my
he's a
gosh.
friend. And so go to billbrownsales.com. And remember, folks, hashtag one call does it all. Deborah Burnett, welcome back.
You betcha. Okay.
So where do we start?
Well, I would like to introduce to your audience a new type of panel discussion, which that's the reason why I was late coming to this interview today. Absolutely. Because we had so much response after the discussion. I introduced and actually had to hard sell to SIL board members that this was the wave of the future, and it worked perfectly. It's an inclusive model of a panel discussion. So rather than having the four panelists who were representative of literally the brain trust that we have for circadian research, sitting at a dais, four chairs behind a draped table, and staring aimlessly at their iPads or out at the audience, we eliminated the table. We literally had the chairs semicircular in front of the audience with the panelists looking out to the audience, and we purposely involved the audience in a participation. Show of hands in between each presenter, show of hands for various questions before and after the panelists presented, so that this way the audience would be able to let the presenters know where they stood on various issues, what their thoughts were, what their depth of understanding and knowledge was pertaining to the topic, which, by the way, was a very complex topic. It was establishing circadian standards to use for occupant building health, wellness.
So Adam Lillian's been telling us about, he's got a little recipe that he believes is the right fit.
Okay.
UL standard, what was it?
24480.
Yes.
And you know, and I love Adam, and he's a friend of the show. But I don't think it's as precise as what people are looking for. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, Mark Ray was one of our panelists, as was Dr. Stephen Lerman and Dr. Martin Ward-Eady, and as well as Jennifer Veach. And they all represented different forms.
That's a seriously hardcore panel. You got
of metallurgy that literally is looking at different aspects of biting the same apple. And so this is what we were exploring. But before we did this, as with the European model, we set it up for the audience to all be on the same playing field. I outlined everything, all of the different models, standards, and guidelines that are available. And then I threw it over to my partner, James Benya, to explain the difference, because very few people understand the difference between a code, a standard, a guideline, a recommendation, and the legal ramifications each of those pose. And then also, to compound the problem, the position statement papers by both the CIE and the IES. And in regard to that UL standard, the guideline, as well as the AMA, there are three position statements that they came out recommending strongly different opinions of attack on how to lessen the light at night, particularly in residential applications. And then the last informational guideline that came out was in 2016 for community lighting that received so much pushback from the AMA. And so basically this panel gave the audience a voice, not literally a voice, but their show of hands. And this did something also for the presenters. They were able to see in real time the audience response, and also to gauge the audience awareness by their show of hands. One of the questions I asked was very pertinent. How many in the audience feel confident enough with their knowledge of circadian entrainment and the use of circadian protocols to provide a benefit, a health or wellness benefit, either productivity, lessening fatigue, lessening the potential for diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. And do you feel confident enough to do that? Or do you rely solely on a manufacturer's sales catalog or the sales rep? And there was only out of an audience of about
And,
100 something.
and just so listeners, like
Yeah.
this Strategies in Light is not is a high level audience.
Yes.
Actually, the audience here is a very high
Yes.
lighting level, knowledge level. I did different angles from it, but one
Okay.
of the most highest.
So take a guess at how many people raised their hands that
How many people
they
in the room? Couple
felt.
hundred in the room?
No, there was a very small room, so maybe about 100, 120 people. So how many hands were raised, including the panelists, the 4 panelists, myself? How many other hands were raised that we feel confident enough to look at the situation, assess the needs of the space, and determine a correct protocol to use for either delivering a health benefit or protecting circadian systems with the occupants,
Including the panelists? I'm gonna say less than 10.
I would say more.
and the caveat was without looking at a manufacturer's
Sure,
catalog,
yeah,
and
just
depending on
knowing the lighting.
including the panelists and me, there were 2 others.
So that would be 6.
Yeah.
Wow, I was
Yeah.
right, less than 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
6.
basically nobody in the audience.
Yeah.
Put their hand up. Yeah.
And so this
yeah.
is the issue that we're facing.
Yeah.
Right now, the knowledge for the general specifier out there, the average lighting designer, architect, manufacturers, in-house design team, they're all relying on manufacturers.
Yeah.
And what's the purpose of manufacturer sales rep?
To pass knowledge along,
And
provide prices,
Sell
and yeah,
product.
sell product. I mean, it's always about money, right?
sure.
So this is the issue that we face. And so it's a dichotomy of how do you get the information out there and do it so that everyone makes money? Because that's the bottom line.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
why are you working?
I like to get the cash.
Oh,
I hate to be crass about it,
but
but
it's true.
I'm
It's always
very
about
motivated.
money.
I'm very motivated by money.
Well, of course we all
Yeah.
are.
I hate-
Otherwise,
like,
we
it's-
all be
it
sitting
sounds
outside
crass.
reading a book and looking at the birds.
Yeah, sure.
And so this is the quandary that we're in right now, because the topic of circadian either protection or circadian stimulus intended to deliver a biological or a behavioral response is predicated upon a team of knowledge that you can refer back to, a team of easily explained guidelines or standards, and a team of manufacturers who know the same amount of information as you do, so you can speak intelligently with each other and not rely on sales talk.
So here's what I'll tell you. Here's what I'm going to say, and I think you're 100% right. So you take the energy efficiency boom of lighting from
Yes.
like say 2000 to now.
Sure.
Linear fluorescent T8, T5
Right.
through to
Got
LED, right? So I mean, lighting has been had made an incredible contribution to the reduction of carbon emissions and
Yes.
saving energy more than any other industry. Nobody even comes close. Right. So we've made our contribution to that. Now, in that contribution, you had the unification of the ivory tower folks at one end, that sit around and talk about lighting. Right, and get paid to do it, right? Like, all the way down to the contractor at Nalmco and the nailed distributor. We're all on the same page, right? We're going to save energy, and we went out, we made mistakes, but we fixed the mistakes, and now we're in an industry that is way better, in terms of energy performance, right? So everybody was unified, and it took some time and some government interventions and rebates and things to nudge people forward. And there's still lots of T12s out there, but we did a great job. I'll tell you this: you have 2 of the best front level lighting salespeople in North America right here. Okay, so we've been doing this for 20 years, selling energy efficiency and all that. Neither one of us want to go anywhere near circadian.
Right.
Like we have we're here talking to you. We talk to everybody.
And you're the exception. You 2 are the exception, truly the exception. And this is the problem that we have, because manufacturers serve a vital purpose. So as everyone in that sales chain, the distributors, the agents, everyone. But the educational content is not the same across all strata. And we need to do a better job of that. We really do.
Well, the regulations for circadian is Byzantine. You have well standard, you have the DLC, you have UL, you have all these different, the DOE and all these different people. I don't know if they're writing regular, but they're all kind of contributing. You got the Lighting Research Center, and they're all kind of contributing, and it's confusing, really. Like, who's in charge?
Right. No one's in charge. And that's what this panel was trying to bring to the foreground, that there's no one really responsible at this point, but we have a lot of good minds trying to get to a point where we could at least understand what we're working on, and then to come up with metrics that would be simple enough for the average user to integrate into a proposal so that the client understands it and buys into it. Because it's just like the old game of whisper down the lane.
Yeah, sure. Broken telephone. Yeah.
Oh my God. And by the time you get to that client, all the client's hearing is, oh my God, I can save all this money, or my employees are going to be like, yay, alert junkies. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. And so this is the reason why we approach this topic from a European model and an inclusive model, rather than just a didactic, talking heads up there at the panel and just and really giving some hardcore information. But in response to your question of how do we proceed from here and how do we get a unifying voice, it's going to take everyone, including the position that you guys hold, including that position of when you're asked, well, what is about the circadian lighting? Do we put controlling lighting in here that changes color? Is that going to be the trick?
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I cannot.
No, but I mean, like, those are the questions. Yeah,
of course it is.
Yeah, you go to distributors, like, well, what do I do? Do I change it from 3,000 to 5,000 over the course of the day? Like, what do I do? Like, this is the kind of questions distributors are asking.
I know, and that's color changing lights, and that doesn't work.
Exactly.
Color changing lights.
But every distributor out there thinks that's what you got to do. You got to start it.
You dim it or you change the color.
Yeah.
Is that right?
No. That's what you don't do. What you do. And this will be a great side gig for you guys.
We need another
side hustle.
Oh yeah, side hustle. No, this is necessary. Okay. And I've been promoting this for a number of years. And even today, one of our panelists even highly recommended this. The use of spectrometers by every lighting specifier.
Here, someone to make some.
We have a spectrometer.
Literally.
Okay.
Because when we look at light from a biological perspective, we look at it based on the percentage of energies that contained within that visible light that luminaire is putting out into the ambient environment. We look at the content percentage of blue. We look at the content percentage of long wavelengths, and the relationship of short wavelengths to long wavelengths. Long wavelengths are in the visual representation would be reds and oranges and deeper reds. Short wavelengths are the violets and the blues. And we know specifically individual wavelengths that are biological stimulants and what those stimulants do in the body. And so either you increase or decrease the percentage of that type of light, or that composition of the light in the energy terms, either increase it during the daylight and decrease it to a certain level at night, or vice versa. That's how far we are with the science right now. We know that between 2 and 12% of short wavelengths at night is definitely going to negatively impact a person's ability to entrain to the darkness, to entrain to that biological rhythm that we have that is dependent upon a darkened environment. But we come into a situation where, what do we do with those workers that have to be vigilant, that have to have high visual acuities, and they're working the graveyard shift?
Yeah, paramedics and
so that's where so that's where having white light that has a purposefully low percentage of short wavelengths contained within that white light will really be a benefit, because then we can provide the best of both worlds. And so this is something that the brain trust that we had as our panel representatives today were working on, and how they're looking at developing this. And you asked a question before we went live, what is the UL stance?
Sure.
Well, the UL
I find theirs the most simple and direct.
Well, the UL stance is actually part of the American Petroleum Institute. And the American Petroleum Institute is working closely with various medical bodies, and they are looking specifically for worker fatigue and accident prevention. This is what they're looking, and they're looking at it from a biological perspective.
Okay.
And so they've done some groundbreaking research identifying the percentages of short wavelengths, where they fall within that spectrum identified as short wavelengths, what can be present at night and what needs to be eliminated to still produce a quality of white light to, enable visual acuity, but not disproportionately disrupt the circadian system. That is the UL perspective. The it's the API, and it's UL verified their light luminaires to be less than 2% blue shortwave at night.
Okay.
The UL, that is the 2448.
Yes.
Okay. That version of the UL is specifically looking at the type of light and the amount of light that comes in from the eye.
Yes.
Whereas the API, they are looking at light from the horizontal surface. Also, the difference is that the metric that is assigned to quantifying the metrology that's used to quantify the UL 2448. Do I have
I have
a number right?
It's 100%.
Yeah,
24480.
Yeah, okay.
24480.
They're looking at it as a metric, as how you calculate the light, and they're looking at it more as as an engineering solution and a numeric solution based on science. The other version, the API version, they are looking at it strictly as a biological recommendation and specification. So this is the difference, and they're both easily understood if you look at it from the percentage of short wavelengths and how much short wavelength energy is contained within the white light source. You as distributors, you guys know, you can have 5 different manufacturers of, say, for example, a 3000 CCT.
Yeah, sure.
And you fire them up. They look like 3 different colors of white light.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you throw a spectrometer on them, oh my gosh, you see different percentages of short wavelength, different percentages of red wavelength.
Yeah, the mix is different. Yeah.
You see plenty of cyan, or you see really deep valleys.
Sure.
But yet they're all rated 3000 CCT. Yep. We can no longer count on CCT as a means to specify lighting. We cannot. I know
We need a complicated 20-step process to.
Yeah.
So here's
like TM30. Is it TM30? Like, that just drives me crazy.
Oh, it's very difficult.
So hang on. I don't want to change gears, but I want to ask.
My headpiece keeps moving off.
Okay. That's okay. So, a couple conversations today, and I don't want to talk about connected lighting with you. Okay. I don't. But I'm going to tell you this. So, the couple concerns came up today, like, why do we even need lighting people? Connected lighting is going to be taken over by, big, Asian semiconductor manufacturers, and the light's just going to be a default. It actually seems to me like we need lighting professionals more than ever now because of the emerging, the stuff that's coming out now. So actually knowing about lighting and knowing about light is going to be more important than ever. So it's actually the opposite of what everybody's saying. Right? So it's like what we need is really enlightened distributors and contractors at the front end, not distributors and contractors. We don't even need to know about light because everything's connected and the connected takes care of everything. No, I think it's the other way around. I think that lighting is going to become even more important based on what you're telling me right now. And understanding lighting.
And the division within the specifiers and the lighting designers, architects, and other design professionals that either dabble or specialize in lighting is even going to become more pronounced, to having health and wellness trained, medically trained, and scientifically adept to interpret light, and then having those individuals educated as to how to assess individual environments with individual groups of people that occupy those spaces.
That was going to be my question.
Yes.
Is I have a customer, it hasn't happened yet, but they say, I want to have circadian friendly lighting. You can do that for them right now?
How many pans went up? 6?
6.
Yeah.
But you can.
Lighting designer to the stars, Deborah Burnett. Come on.
We can do this based on the first do no harm principle.
Yep.
And the type of information that we gather. We do not just gather, okay, how many square feet do you have? How many daylight, lumens are coming in? And we look at the colors and the light reflectivity values of all surface and finished materials. We look at the age and reproductive viability of the occupants of the space. We look at their afterlife work light history.
Hang on, reproductive viability?
Yes.
You're talking about women?
Women and men.
Like being able to, where they are at in terms of menopause or not?
Yes.
Huh.
Because
you would actually consider that?
Yes, we do. Because light impacts testosterone levels as well as fertilization
I
rates.
must have great lighting in my office.
Everyone says that.
Come on, man.
But this is something that we look into consideration. We also look into consideration very important their health status. So without looking at HIPAA records and without divulging or getting into very personal what drugs do you use, what prescription drugs, et cetera, we do observational assessments on BMI, body mass index, because that also has a disproportionate impact on how well we sleep, how our body functions, and how our biological processes work. The adaptability of our processes to changes in our circadian environment.
Let me ask you. I want to ask you something. I don't know. I'm going to try to formulate this question, as I ask it, and maybe you'll infer what I'm asking you by the way I'm kind of going through it. So, I feel like before we discovered circadian rhythms as a science community or as a lighting community, so I don't know when that was, whether it was the 70s or the 60s or the 90s or whenever that came about, but I think we really stepped away from the evolved environment long before we figured out circadian rhythm. So when we're figuring this out, are we figuring it out on people whose circadian rhythms are already messed up? And like, wouldn't we be better off in studying sort of like First Nations people that lived in the traditional way that humans lived prior to modern industrialized societies to see what is the right circadian rhythm? Or do you know already what that is? Like, you don't have to go back to the base case. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Actually, there's been some attempts at that, but the indigenous people are very reluctant and obviously so to submit themselves to modern day techniques for measurement as well as evaluation. But there was a very interesting study that was done by
so you understand my question?
Yes, by Kenneth Wright out. I think it was in Colorado at the time. He did a wonderful study, and he basically took his undergrads and postdoc participants in his classes out to the environment for a camping trip. And he did on 2 different occasions. And they were looking at the circadian stimulus as well as their sleep efficacy. Sleep efficacy is just how quickly can you fall asleep, how your duration of sleep and how well you sleep if you get up in the middle of the night to pee or whatever. And then how do you naturally get up in the morning? And within just a matter of a day or less, all of their circadian rhythms were aligned with the natural light level and seasonality of where they were
within 1 day.
Within 1 day to 2 days.
Wow.
Yeah. And again, I don't have that study in front of me, so I can't be specific. But it was amazing how quickly the human will adapt. And by the way, the students were specifically prohibited to having any iPhones, iPads, computers, anything that would disrupt their light intake. And they were totally at the mercy of the moon, the light, and the stars. And that was it.
You know what's interesting? I kind of go down these rabbit holes, but I'm a big believer in the I don't know if the right word is. I don't like religiosity in a sense, but I'm very spiritual.
Sure.
And you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't like to get into like whose religion is the best religion. I think religion is layered over something a lot deeper. And I think one of the elements of us as spiritual beings, one reason why people are maybe less spiritual than they used to is because they can't see the stars. You understand what I mean? Like, I think that I said this earlier, that there's a reason why our ancestors wanted burnt lamb smoke to go up to the sky. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes,
there's a reason for that, right? Because when they lied at night, when they were watching their sheep or whatever, it was mind-blowing, right? And so they knew that there was more to this universe than them and their iPhone or whatever, right? And I think that our circadian rhythms also expand our consciousness, allowing us to enter other states of consciousness that we were not allowed to enter if we don't engage in a proper circadian rhythm. You understand what I'm saying? Like, if our relationship to light and to the universe is messed up, we can't be complete. Am I talking crazy here?
No, actually, I mean, going back to that Kenneth Wright experiment, and anytime any of you have had to take, your kids or your dog or whatever outside and sleep in a sleeping bag outside, you immediately have the opportunity to declutter your mind and just look up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you do. And it's instant, and it's really interesting right now, times that we are, because we have so many well-educated researchers out there looking.
You say that with a little touch of contempt in your voice.
Yeah, because I say that with somewhat of a contempt, because they're still hemmed in with the old academic premise of, I've got to do this so I have my paper published, so I can stay viable, so I can get a job, so I can keep my grant, I can get more grants.
The academic world might be broken, actually.
Well, it's starting to come around, and starting to come around with the human exploration of what you raised, about the almost spiritual like relationship that we have with the universe. But they're doing it in a scientific manner. Case in point, there's been a number of studies that have come out about the stars themselves and the twinkling patterns of the stars that we visually see, and how different life forms are receiving the frequencies of those light twinkles. When we see a twinkle, it's basically an on and off light, right? At different speeds.
It's flickering.
Boop, 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 boop.
Yeah,
well, there are certain organisms, vertebrates as well as invertebrates, that literally are responding to those. And so when we have
Come on, Deborah Burnett. Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not.
That's wild.
No, and the problem is that we are obliterating the ability to see because of our light pollution. And there's a false idea out there that if we just turn the lights out in a certain street, we're going to be able to go out at night and look up and see the stars. It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way.
We have to turn out the lights of all the lights in the entire city to be able to see the stars. We had spoken about this on our last discussion about when LA,
which will remain private.
That's true. Well, all of us was there, and yes, including our dog Walter and my husband Jim. Yeah. Okay, so when LA had a blackout through one of the earthquakes several years ago, the phone banks went crazy because people thought the entire city was burning. There was smoke everywhere. Well, all of LA was without lights. Emergency lighting, street lighting, building lighting, path lighting. It was totally gone. The smoke was the Milky Way. Seriously. I remember the first time I saw the Milky Way. It was at the south rim of the Grand Canyon. And I arrived late at night, and I signed up to go on a guided tour at midnight. And I'm waiting on the outside veranda, at this, no, it was the North Rim, sorry, I apologize. And I'm standing there and I'm thinking, who is barbecuing at night? I don't even smell anything. They must be barbecuing, I don't know, some grass or something, like real grass, not marijuana grass, because I couldn't smell anything. And it was like, where's all this smoke coming from? And the guide came up and she said, what are you observing? And I said, where's the smoke? Where's this all coming from? And she said, you've never seen the Milky Way, have you?
Yeah,
and I said,
true.
Oh my God. It was, I'm getting goosebumps now. And this is like 20 years ago or more that I saw the Milky Way. It was incredible. And for those folks that have never seen it, that's
your heritage in a way. It's our heritage.
And they will miss the intent behind your original question of, are we obliterating our history, our humanity, our evolutionary perspective on all of what's going on right now? And yes, when you see the Milky Way for the first time, or the Aurora Borealis, or any natural expression of light, it's
sublime.
It's beyond words. It's absolutely incredible.
And a lot of things make sense, like why people burnt sacrifices.
Yes, of course.
It makes sense all of a sudden. Yeah, of course they would send the smoke up there because it's so unbelievably mind-blowing.
Oh, yes. And it mingles among what was we perceived to be smoke of the Milky Way.
Yeah, sure.
And so it disperses. And the Milky Way is representative of all that we do not see during the day. The day represents our mindful, our willful intent. And at night, It's our true spirituality, our true humanity.
And those are different states of consciousness that
Yes,
you
of
can
course
enter.
they are.
You know, seriously.
Oh, yeah.
And many people, I think, you know, I have a coach. He's going to be at the NAILD convention in Biloxi, 19th to 23rd, folks. Luke Sellers, but he thinks that people are missing probably 50 or 60% of life by not engaging in their spiritual side or their internal side or that part of life, which involves the Milky Way.
Yes.
Like, you got to get the Milky Way into your life, son. You
And
need
it's
to
not
have that
candy,
in your life.
and it's not
No,
candy.
it's not a candy. You know, and so and you know, luckily as a Canadian, I have access to that, and a lot easier than Americans do. I think there's a lot more. Yeah, you know, Canada's low on people and high on geography and forests, so we're lucky. I have access to it more than most, but you know, it is a wonderful part of your life, and you know, this whole lighting question is so fascinating right now. Like, I feel like we got through this energy era now, and we're kicking the bean counters out of the business now. You know, okay, we've had enough of you bean counters now. We're here to have some fun. Give us some energy to play with back now. You know?
So something that you said about, you know, being Canadian and you have access to the light, particularly at night. I would not hesitate to guess that both of you have an understanding of the different stages of night simply by gazing up at the stars and looking at the different colors of the sky.
Sure, they change.
Well, actually, that, when we look at that in scientific terms as well as engineering terms, we're looking at it as astronomical or nautical, civil, and astronomical twilight. And they vary. They vary by degrees of the orb, the solar orb, above or below the horizon line.
Okay.
8 degrees, 12 degrees, 16 and 18 degrees. And each one of those changes elicits different neuroendocrine and biological, but the body's different in our brain body and the frost on where that solar orb is in terms of degrees above or below the horizon line. And keep in mind, because of the curvature of the Earth, we don't see when the sun actually rises above the horizon line because of where we are and the curvature of the Earth and the latitude and anything, mountains and trees and everything else in our way. So there's so many things that the body is already hardwired to do that most people don't understand.
That we're muffling or we're suppressing, and we don't even know we're doing it.
Right.
That's the sad part. It's like,
yes, it is.
You know, one of the things that, again, this fellow Luke, he says, you got to show up for yourself. You got to spend time in nature every day, right? We just got to spend time in nature. What does that mean? It means swimming in the light, the natural light. You know, you have to. There's something to all of this that is a reckon. We need to reckon with this, what we've done in a sense. To our, you know what I'm saying? It's like a reckoning. It's like, okay, now, you know, this development can only go so far until we're no longer even alive anymore. We're kicking ourselves loose from the earth if we cover the earth with light and can't see the stars anymore, and all these other problems that we have in relation to it. I just love this industry right now in terms of what it's reckoning with, what the questions it's tackling.
Has great potential.
It does.
For both to destroy itself or to promote what we are on the path to do.
Crossroads.
Yeah, we really are. And that's the reason why having distributors and manufacturers understand all of the ramifications of circadian relevance and biological stimulus and understanding it well enough to translate it to couch potatoes.
Yeah, for sure.
And if manufacturers and distributors can do that, you will go a long way of helping humanity and individuals avoid being sold snake oil, because color changing lights does not get it. It's just color changing lights. I'm sorry to say.
Fancy schmancy.
Oh yeah, it's fancy schmancy lights that within 8 to 9 months is just going to sit there, and it's going to be, damn, we spent a lot of money on this, and everybody just keeps it at one color throughout the day.
That's why one call does it all. If you want fancy schmancy or you want the real deal, go to BillBrownSales.com. They got everything, man. They're a progressive sales manufacturer's rep.
That's right.
Probably the oldest in the United States. Plus, named after one of the great gentlemen of the lighting business, Bill Brown himself. Lots of integrity. We love those folks over at BillBrownSales.com. Remember, folks, hashtag one call does it all. Deborah and Burnett, thank you so much.
Oh, you're more than welcome, guys. I always appreciate speaking to both of you guys.
Oh,
too bad Walter, the dog's not here.
Yeah, we'll get him next time. Come on, Walter.
Bye-bye.
Hey, and folks out there, thank you for listening.
Bye.